honor and a privilege to be able to share with you this morning. I appreciate so much the family on the Hill and our incredible staff, and that starts with our pastor. And so thank you, Pastor, for this opportunity. When the pastor asked me a couple weeks ago about speaking on this day, he kind of gave me a little bit of direction of I could continue the rooted in gratitude. I could kind of start towards Christmas, but he really wanted me to share a little bit of my heart. And so where I landed on that is, as you saw in the bumper video, rooted in gratitude, but from the book of Esther, what I would consider to be a life verse, to share a little bit of my heart and what I believe God has for us this morning. So if you've got your Bibles or however you flip, scroll, or as long as you don't get on Facebook or whatever, let's go to the book of Esther, chapter 4. And the title of this sermon is Gratitude, No Coincidences Allowed. See, the definition of a coincidence, as you'll see it pop up here in a second, is a remarkable concurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection. What that essentially means is it's happenstance, it's fate, chance, luck, serendipity. See, our worldview as Christians prevents us from being able to say we believe in coincidence because we believe in God's providence. We believe that everything that has happened to us and in our world is by God's plan, His will, or has been allowed by His will. So there is no such thing as coincidence. See, coincidence and gratitude go together like this. When we believe things are a coincidence, they might result in a shallow sense of thankfulness or gratitude. But when we recognize that everything is by God's providence, it is a deeper sense of gratitude. An example would be this. How many of you have ever had an experience where you were about to leave on a trip, somebody forgot their sunglasses, forgot a wallet, somebody has to run back inside, you get back in the car, and a few minutes up the road, you see an accident on the road. See, many of us might look at that and think, that's a coincidence. Man, I'm really thankful that we didn't get in that accident. I'm thankful that we forgot our sunglasses. But when we recognize that God's hand has protected us, our gratitude goes a lot deeper. See, coincidence in our world seems to be the feeling of the perception of the day. For instance, you can Google amazing coincidences, and good luck spelling coincidence, but Google's pretty smart. You can get a number of stories like this one. We'll show you a picture. Nick and Amy Wheeler were about to get married. They were going through bunch of photos, getting ready to make, one of those photo montages that you'll show at the reception or before the service starts. And this photo comes up. They're looking through it. In the foreground is Nick playing with his family on a family vacation. And they happen to notice Amy playing in the background on a different family vacation. We're not playing together, weren't there as a joint family. A picture caught in time. These two individuals who would later come to get married. Seeming coincidence. There's a bunch of those stories on Google. One of my favorites is there's another story of a ship in about 1670 that went down. The only survivor's name, Hugh Williams. About 100 years later, another boat goes down in the same spot. Only survivor, Hugh Williams. There were two other occasions in history where a ship went down in that general area. The only survivor, Hugh Williams. So the next time you book a cruise, book it under Hugh Williams, right? I mean, seeming coincidence, but we know our biblical perspective is it is God's providence. What I want to do is I want us to look at a case study, if you will, from the book of Esther. We're going to be reading a few verses from chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. I'm going to read these verses and I'm going to zoom back out and kind of give the context and how they fit in. Verse 13. Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, "Don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, liberation and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's house will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this." Such a time as this. See, one of the things I love about the book of Esther is this. You may or may not know this already, but the name of God does not appear in the entire book of Esther. Yet he is the main character. Why I like that is this. Many of us walk around in 2015, almost 16, saying, I wish God would show up like he did in the Old Testament. My life, I just don't see him showing up in these dramatic, miraculous ways. I would even take, Jesus as he would show up in these miracles, etc. And yet in the book of Esther, we have a woman and Mordecai, her uncle, operating where God doesn't show up in the traditional fashion. His name doesn't even show up, but yet he is the main character. May I suggest we are like Esther. Even though we may not feel or see God moving in these dramatic ways, know that God is the main character in your story. Now, we can look at the book of Esther and assume it is just a bunch of coincidences. I mean, if you numbered the total of all the things that had to come into place for this story to take place, it's obvious it's not coincidence, it's providence. For instance, if you're not familiar with the story, let me just give you a little background. In the first couple of chapters, the king is having a huge party. I mean, it went on for months. We get down to like a 7-day period where he's like, let's really blow the doors off of this thing. The guys are going to have a party. The ladies are going to have a party. Much wine was flowing. He told the servants, let anybody have whatever they want. I want this to be the party to end all parties. At some point, after the wine had been flowing pretty good, he got the idea, let's bring my wife in to entertain. And like any self-respecting woman, she declined to go and be shown about in front of her husband and all his knucklehead friends, right? That concerned all the men at the party. They get together and they're like, King, look, if your wife is going to disobey an order from you, all of our wives in the whole kingdom are going to be like, hey, Queen Vashti did it. So we need a new plan. Why don't you remove her, and then why don't we have a little process, what we might call today of The Bachelor. Right? I mean, this is the plan, is let's remove Vashti. Let's get all the best-looking ladies from the kingdom to come meet with the king, and whoever he gives the rose to is the queen. Very scandalous, right? I mean, maybe in 2016, it might not even be The Bachelor. It might even be like an eHarmony commercial. I don't know. I mean, it's just, let's bring them all in, and let's see what happens. Is it a coincidence that the queen was dismissed? Is it a coincidence that then Esther was then chosen to be part of this process? Was it a coincidence then that she gained the favor of the one who was over her? Was it a coincidence as Mordecai went to check on his niece that he overheard 2 eunuchs having a discussion about a plot to assassinate the king? Sidebar, I wonder if the plot to assassinate him was because they were eunuchs anyways. And so then Mordecai discovers it, turns it in. All of a sudden, it's written down in a book. Mordecai is then placed in the book as an honor, but yet was not honored publicly yet. The plot was foiled. Was it then a coincidence that on her night to meet the king, that she is chosen? I mean, we could say it's coincidence, but it's really providence. See, there's another story. The tension begins, and there's a man named Haman, one of the king's right-hand men. And he comes in and he's going to be honored and he wants all the people to bow down. And there's a man, Mordecai, who we've met, Esther's uncle, who does not bow down. Now we may wonder, why does Mordecai not bow down? Well, the servants of Haman want to find out. They get to the source of it and they discover and they report back to Haman. He will not bow down because he is Jewish. This infuriates Haman. See, what has happened here is not just two guys having a standoff, but a family feud. Some of you, if you like Game Show Network, you can almost always find Steve Harvey doing Family Feud or one of the other ones. Sometimes you get a throwback. Some of us who grew up on the old Game Show Network remember Richard Dawson, the guy who used to creepily kiss all the women on the lips. Like, what is going on? Like, why was that allowed after why are you kissing my mom and my sister? It's just like, but anyways, Family Feud breaks out because this is what happens. Way back when, see, Mordecai is a tribe of Benjamin, son of Kish, which to the Jewish reader reading Esther would automatically send up an antenna that says, hey, that sounds a lot like the lineage of King Saul. Then when you get the lineage of Haman in the book of Esther, all of a sudden another antenna goes up. He is the descendant of Agag, the Amalekite. See, Saul was commissioned to totally destroy the Amalekites and the king and not to touch any of the possessions. And he failed to do so, and it was decreed that the Amalekites would be a thorn in Israel's side for many generations. And now, all the way to Mordecai and Haman, family feud. Because we may wonder, why would Haman jump from, let's just kill Mordecai, to let's kill all the Jews? Because that's what he does. That seems like overkill. But it goes deeper, right? It is this feud. And so now all the Jewish people are at risk. And then we come to our text where Haman writes to the one person he feels like might have a chance of helping the people, his niece Esther, the queen. And he writes to her and he says, look, they have cast lots, right? Chance, fate, to determine a day in the future where they're going to exterminate us, genocide of the Jewish people. And Esther says, look, you know that you cannot approach the king without being summoned. If you do that, you can be killed unless he extends the scepter to you. I'm scared. He hasn't called for me in like 30 days. And Mordecai writes these words, perhaps you have been brought to the kingdom for such a time as this. For such a time as this. See, over the summer, before I came to Harmony Hill, we took a group of students to Indianapolis to work with a church planner. When we gathered on that first day, he was giving us a little speech. It was obvious that he had played football in high school. I don't know that he did much as far as like college or anything like that, but he was still living in the days of everything being about football. You kind of know what I'm talking about. So he was gathering our group and was going to give us like the pregame speech or the halftime, let's get it together, boys. And so he's standing there and he gives this speech. He says 3 times, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Now, to be honest, my students kind of missed the nuance of what he was trying to say. And so I had to explain it to them later. But in a crowd like this, a lot of bright people, I know you get it. But in case some of my students are watching via online, I need to explain it to them again. Here we go, right? He's differentiating why. Like, why are you on this planet? Simply to give God glory, to make him famous, and to spread it to the nations. Why are you here? Pastor's been speaking on this the last several weeks. I love the phrase he used. You may have heard it before. I had not. There are accidental parents, but no accidental births, right? It's a pretty powerful statement. God created you in his image and has a plan for you. Why are you then here? Why are you here? See, I partly mean, why are you in this sanctuary this morning? See, some of you may be here because you are visiting mom or grandmom, and normally you don't go to church, but when you visit them, you just know that's part of it. I want you to know it's not a coincidence, it's providence. There may be something going on in your life, and it is now providence, not coincidence, that you are here. See, I also mean not just in this room, but why are you here in Lufkin, Texas? You could be anywhere on the planet God could have led you to. Why are you here? I also mean by that, why are you here in your office, your classroom, the street or apartment you live in? Why are you here? See, that's the question Mordecai asked Esther. Perhaps you have come, not by coincidence, for such a time as this. So that's my question to us. Why are you here? Now, I don't want to leave you hanging with the story in case you're unfamiliar, so let's move quickly through the end of it. Is this: Esther takes the challenge and writes back and says, please pray for me because I'm going to do this thing. She goes to the king. He extends the scepter. Now, it could have gone the other way. Could have been, guards, take her away. He'd already done that with one wife, but he extends the scepter. She says, let me bring you to a banquet. Invite Haman. Haman's pumped. He's going to a special banquet. They have the banquet. Next day, can we have another banquet? Haman's pumped. Meanwhile, he's building gallows for Mordecai to be hung upon. Don't you just love it in a story where the villain gets their comeuppance? Don't you just love the word comeuppance? Right? It's like when the villain gets what everybody wants them to get. Now, in the first service, I showed the Karate Kid. But in this service, I want to show you a clip from the movie The Avengers. A little scene of what it's like for a character to get their comeuppance, a little bit of what it was like for Haman. Let's watch this clip.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Puny god.
That's pretty much what happened in the book of Esther. I don't know if it's shot for shot, but, right? Don't you love that? He stands up, so boastful like Haman. And then the plan, on the second day of the banquet, Esther reveals this man is trying to exterminate all my people. And there's some other parts you can read in there, but it ultimately Haman ends up on the very gallows intended for Mordecai. Mordecai is then given opportunity for the very day that the people of God, the Jewish people, were to be exterminated, that they may now take up arms and defend themselves. And actually, the book of Esther is in part written to commemorate the festival called Purim, where God saved them. Remember, though, that Purim stands for lot. Remember how the lots were cast for the day? Remember how it seemed like fate, like coincidence, but it was providence. So my question is, why are you here? What is your such a time as this? I want us to look at three things quickly of how we can live a life for such a time as this. The first thing would be this: we must open our eyes to what God is doing around us. We must open our eyes to what God is doing around us. See, this verse became meaningful to me on a mission trip when I was in college. Our pastor, I went to Auburn. Our pastor in Auburn had left to go plant a church in Seattle. And so some youth in college went to go help. And I decided I was going to read the book of Esther as my daily devotion every day. It was the perfect number of chapters for the number of days we were going to be on the field. So I began to read it, and it was not too far into it that I recognized man, this is powerful. God is provident. Such a time as this. I began to look for my such a time as this on that trip. I worked hard all week looking for it, and I mean, there was good ministry, but it just didn't feel like that was it. So then we were about to fly back, and I was like, I know this can't be it because I signed up late for the trip, and so my flight was different from everyone else's. So I was like, all right, this is going to be somewhere on this journey home. And I had one of those journeys where you go to about every airport in the United States on your way, one of those type things. I ended up in Pittsburgh. And I get out of the plane, I'm walking down the thing and look towards the screen for my next flight, the connector that would get me to Atlanta, and it says delayed 1 hour. So I began to walk towards that terminal. I get on one of those people movers, you know what I'm talking about, where you can stand still and you're still moving faster than the people walking. And it's just awesome, right? And so I get off and I look at the next screen. It's like your flight's been delayed 2 hours. And I get off the next people mover and you're delayed 3 hours. And so I just started walking. I was like, I don't know what's going on with those things. So I just started walking. And then it was just by the time I got to the terminal, it's just canceled. Here's a hotel room and like a $5 McDonald's breakfast certificate or whatever. So I'm thinking, all right, somebody here, you're my such a time as this. Except everybody's angry when all the flights are canceled, right? And they're like, stop talking to me. I don't like you right now. I don't like anybody. And so I'm like, okay, let's just go to the hotel, maybe tomorrow. I show up the next morning to my gate, and it was so obvious my such a time as this. I mean, it would not have been more obvious if a banner had unrolled and said, this is it, arrow, bing. Because sitting there at my terminal was a young lady who we had met in Seattle, who actually lives in Auburn, and we were going to be on the same flight. And then I got petrified. Because it's one thing to be like, God, I'm ready to do it. I've got my eyes open. And it's another thing to actually do it. So we began a discussion, and hey, we're on the same flight, and found out that her ride from Atlanta to Auburn had fallen through. And she was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, hey, I'll be driving that way. You can ride with me. So the whole plane ride, I'm thinking, all right, the journey from Atlanta to Auburn, it's going to be go time. Ministry go time, not making a move on this poor girl, right? I had my eyes in the right place. And so we're walking to the baggage claim. She gets a phone call and says, hey, another one of my friends is going to be able to pick me up. Thank you for the offer of the ride. And I'm thinking, oh no, I have to do this right now. And so what must have sounded like the worst pickup line in the history of pickup lines, I just went into it. Do you believe in coincidence? And I know she had to be thinking, how do I let this guy down easy? I'm like, no. See, God, I think, put me here to tell you something. I told her my story of how we're on the flight and how I should have been home yesterday. See, God loves you. Jesus died for you, and he can forgive you. And walking to the baggage carousel, she begins to weep. And I'm like, uh-oh, now what, Lord? You know, like, I don't know what to do with this, but as her friends came to collect her, thank you, I really did need that. See, God is moving all around us, but our eyes open to see it. The second thing that we need to do to live a life for such a time as this is, number 2, we must learn to be grateful for where God has placed us. See, we can have a shallow thankfulness for where God has placed us. We can even have a bitterness for where God has placed us if we deem how we got to where we are as bad luck, happenstance, serendipity. But it comes from a true place of gratitude when we realize that God in providence, not coincidence, has us where we are, and we need to be grateful. I was doing prison ministry, and I met a guy, and we were sharing our stories, and he told me this story that he had come to know the Lord, felt convicted that he needed to confess to the police a crime that he committed years earlier, went down, confessed, was immediately arrested, was put into prison, pretty long sentence. And he was like, but I know I am exactly where God wants me to be. I'm like, what? He said, in fact, I've been in 4 fights in like 10 years. And every one of the people that I got in a fight with, I've now led to the Lord. He goes, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. He said, they keep offering me parole, but I just don't feel like God's done with me. Whoa. Talk about being grateful for where God has placed us. Not bitterness, not anger, not woe is me. Gratefulness. I don't know what curveballs you may have felt like life has thrown you, but God has you in His providence, and we need to be grateful for the opportunities that we have. Thirdly, I'll say this. We must be willing to take the necessary risks to be part of His plan. We must take the necessary risks to be part of His plan. This is a real easy illustration for me. My family and I, after 6.5 years of ministering in Columbus, Mississippi, not looking to move in any way, felt very definitively, clearly, that God wanted us to take the risk of relocating several months ago to the Hill here in Lufkin. I mean, we're going to take our kids from the only home that they've known. We've got a great group of friends. I mean, ministry with students that I love and parents that I love, close to our families. But I don't know about you, but I want to be where God wants me to be. And so we took the risk to be where God would have us to be. Part of His plan. Part of His plan. I don't know what the risks are that you need to take. It might be starting a conversation with someone at work. It might be risking rejection by walking across the street to begin a relationship with a neighbor. I mean, imagine if we considered our homes our ministry, our neighborhood. Imagine if we considered our workplace our ministry for such a time as this. Imagine if we considered Starbucks our ministry. They know how you like your latte by heart, but do they know who makes your heart beat? We've got to take the risks to go into the missions room and get out of our comfort zone and tutor a kid at Costin or work at Petty's or go overseas. We may need to get out of our comfort zone to join a life group because somebody in that group needs what we have to offer, and we may need something that someone in that group is going to offer us. And those of you who've been a part of any of those things I've mentioned know exactly what I'm talking about. Those aren't coincidences, they are providence. I came across a little acronym that I like. Joel, if you want to go ahead and come on up. We're coming to the close here. It's a little acronym, FOMO, fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. We do a lot of things because of the fear of missing out. We will jettison responsibilities that we or deadlines that we have because someone's invited us to a get-together or a party or there's a big game, and we don't want to miss out. We fear missing out. I kind of experienced that this week. The first part of Thanksgiving, I had the privilege of going and speaking at a youth retreat in Mississippi for a friend of mine and his youth group. And about 10 o'clock that night, they decided in the middle of the woods and all these cabins, let's have a capture the flag, just game or whatever. So they filled up socks with flour and they tied a knot in it so when you throw it, it kind of makes a poof and you know who's been hit and you can feel it. They tied glow sticks on the clotheslines so that we wouldn't decapitate ourselves running around in the dark. And some of the students were like, come on, Mr. Todd, please come play with us. And I didn't want to miss out. I love that kind of stuff. And so one of the games, there was a kid named Macklemore, great name, by the way. And I was like, Macklemore, me and you, we're going for the flag. Give me your socks. So he gives me all his ammo. I'm like, you're running. I'm your cover. Let's do this thing. And we start running. and I'm throwing socks and dodging like the Matrix and all this kind of, it really wasn't that cool looking, I'm sure. But in your mind, right? And all of a sudden, we got into this firefight, and all of a sudden, a path was open. I was like, Macklemore, go for the flag. I've got you. And his 16-year-old self goes blazing through the woods. Myself starts as fast as I can until, in the dark, I missed it, fell into a ditch hard. Big old bruise, scrapes. I mean, that's why I was like, oh my goodness, I'm actually old. Like the next morning I woke up, I was like, I mean, it's a cot, but still, I'm in pain. Lord, touch my body. You know what, though? We didn't even get the flag. Macklemore got destroyed because his gunner was in a ditch. But I tell you this, I'm glad I did it. I would much rather, though, this morning, that you respond because your fear of missing out on what God has for your life. Respond. Don't go to the cabin while everybody else is out in the battle. Remember, Mordecai told Esther, deliverance will come for the Jews with your help or not. Same is true. Ministry will be done. God's purposes will be done. But wouldn't you rather be part of it?